For decades, thousands of murder cases remained frozen in time. Evidence sat untouched in dusty storage rooms, families waited with broken hearts, and killers lived normal lives, believing they had escaped forever. But science changed everything. With the rise of modern DNA technology and genetic genealogy, old evidence that once meant nothing suddenly became the most powerful weapon against crime. Today, we will explore chilling cold cases that were finally solved by new DNA technology, proving that even after decades of silence, the truth can still be uncovered. In the 1970s and 1980s, California was terrorized by a mysterious criminal known as the Golden State Killer. He committed dozens of assaults and at least 13 murders, then vanished without a trace. For more than 40 years, police had DNA but no suspect. In 2018, investigators uploaded the crime scene DNA to a public genealogy website. Within weeks, they traced the DNA to a former police officer named Joseph D'Angelo. At the age of 72, he was arrested. One of the most infamous cold cases in American history was finally solved using modern DNA genealogy. In 1986, 20-year-old Michelle McGrath was found murdered in Chicago. The evidence was weak, witnesses were silent, and the case went cold almost immediately. For over 30 years, her family had no answers. In 2018, detectives tested preserved evidence using advanced DNA tools. The DNA matched a man already in prison for another violent crime. After 32 years of silence, Michelle's killer was finally identified, proving that even old evidence can still speak when technology improves. 8-year-old April Tinsley disappeared while walking home from school in Indiana in 1988. Her body was later discovered, but her killer remained unknown for decades. The case haunted the town and terrified parents. In 2018, police tested DNA taken from a letter the killer had once sent to authorities. That DNA led them to John D. Miller, a quiet man who had lived in the same community all along. He confessed, and after 30 long years, April's family finally received justice through new DNA science. 17-year-old Carla Walker was kidnapped and murdered in Texas in 1974. At the time, investigators had very little to work with, and the trail went cold. Her family waited nearly half a century for answers. In 2019, forensic experts used advanced DNA testing on preserved evidence. The results identified Glenn McCurley, a man who had once been questioned but never arrested. After 45 years, Carla's killer was finally exposed because of modern DNA breakthroughs. In Los Angeles, a serial killer known as the Grim Sleeper murdered multiple women between 1985 and 2007. Police had DNA but no name. The killer lived quietly among his neighbors, believing he was invisible. In 2010, genealogy databases finally led investigators to Lonnie Franklin Jr. He was arrested near his home and later convicted. DNA technology ended one of Los Angeles' longest-running terror campaigns. In 1984, Helen Gale was brutally murdered in England. There were no witnesses and no suspect. For 35 years, the case remained frozen in time. In 2019, scientists tested old blood samples using modern DNA profiling. The results identified the killer, a man who had died years earlier. Although he never faced trial, Helen's family finally learned the truth about who had taken her life through advanced DNA science. In 1986, Janet Ringe was killed in California. Police had DNA but no match. The case stayed cold for 30 years. In 2016, detectives reopened the case and used genealogy databases to test the DNA. The results identified a suspect who had lived freely for decades. He was arrested at the age of 72. After 3 decades of silence, Janet's family finally heard the words they had waited for. The killer had been found. In 1979, the body of a young woman was found on the side of a road in Texas. She had no identification and no missing person report. For decades, she was known only as Orange Socks, named after the bright socks she was wearing. In 2019, 40 years later, genetic genealogy finally revealed her identity as Deborah Sue Jackson. Although her killer was already dead, Deborah finally got her name back, and her family finally learned what had happened to her because of DNA technology. In 1957, the body of a young boy was found in a box in Philadelphia. For 64 years, he was known only as the boy in the box. No one knew his name or his family. In 2022, genetic genealogy finally identified him as Joseph Augustus Cirelli. Although his killer remains unknown, DNA technology gave this child his identity back after more than 6 decades of silence. In 1971, college student Rita Curran was brutally murdered in Vermont. The case went cold almost immediately. For 52 years, her family waited for answers. In 2023, detectives used DNA genealogy to test preserved evidence from the crime scene. The DNA led to a man who had already died years earlier. Even though he never faced justice in court, Rita's family finally learned the truth after more than half a century. In 1975, young mother Sherry Rasmussen was murdered in California. For decades, her husband believed a burglar had killed her. In 2009, more than 33 years later, DNA evidence finally revealed the truth. The killer was a police officer who had been obsessed with Sherry's husband. She was arrested and later convicted. DNA technology exposed one of the most shocking betrayals in cold case history. These cases prove that DNA is more powerful than time. Evidence that once seemed useless can suddenly become the key to justice. Every strand of hair, every drop of blood, every forgotten fingerprint holds a story waiting to be told when the right technology arrives. Behind every solved cold case is a story of patience and pain. Families who never stopped believing. Detectives who refused to give up. Scientists who pushed technology forward. Justice may arrive slowly, but when it does, it changes everything. Some killers lived normal lives for decades, raising families and going to work, believing their crimes were buried forever. But the past never truly stays buried. DNA databases, genetic genealogy, and modern forensic science are now opening doors that were once locked forever. Murderers who once felt safe are now being found in their old age, sometimes arrested in front of neighbors who never suspected a thing. These stories are not just about crime. They are about memory, about refusing to forget the victims, about proving that every life matters, even decades later. When a cold case is solved, it is not just a legal victory, it is a human victory for every family that waited in silence for justice. As we come to the end of today's journey, take a moment to think about the people behind these stories. They were not just names in police files. They were sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, friends and parents whose lives were suddenly taken. For decades, their families lived with questions that had no answers, waking up every day hoping that someone somewhere would finally uncover the truth. These cases remind us that justice is not always fast and it is rarely easy. Sometimes it takes 20 years. Sometimes it takes 40, sometimes it takes 60, but the truth has a way of surviving. A single drop of blood, a forgotten fingerprint, an old letter, or a new technology can suddenly bring light into the darkest places. What once seemed impossible becomes real, and silence finally turns into answers. To every investigator who refused to give up, to every scientist who pushed DNA technology forward, and to every family who never stopped believing, these victories belong to you. Because of your strength and patience, killers who thought they were safe were finally exposed, and victims who were once forgotten were finally heard. If these stories moved you, remember that there are still thousands of cold cases waiting for their moment of truth. Somewhere, another family is still waiting for closure, still hoping that one day the phone will ring with the words they have dreamed of hearing for years. We solved the case. Thank you for spending this time with us and honoring the memories of those who are lost. If you believe in justice and in the power of truth, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more real stories that prove one powerful message. No matter how long it takes, justice never truly sleeps.